going to show you how to change lower ball joints on a 2002 F-150. Now this procedure applies to 1997 through 2004 Heritage F-150s, and it's a very well shot, very detailed video. So if you've never done ball joints before, I'll show you exactly how to do them and all my tips and tricks I've learned throughout the years to get it done and get it done right. All the little tools I use throughout the video to make the job easier that you may find useful, I'll also link down below in the video description. Now this is part of a bigger repair where I was doing hub and bearing on it also, so if you're going through the video and you're watching the ball joint video and you see all of a sudden a brand new shiny hub and bearing, don't freak out. That's just part of another video that I was shooting and another repair on this vehicle, so enjoy. Alright, now the first thing you got to do is pull the wheel off. Obviously, the lug nuts on here are 13/16 or 21 millimeters. So you want to break torque on these if you don't have an impact before you lift it off the ground on here. So just break torque and get them loose, and then you can take them off by hand anytime after that. Something like this. Now me personally, I use impacts for just about everything. So we're going to try the old 3/8 impact from Milwaukee and see if we can get these lugs off of here. It's a breakaway torque of 200 foot-pounds, and these should be 150 or less. There it is. That was loose from earlier. That one also. That one. I like how fast this thing is. That's the best part about it. It's light too. So after that, to get our wheel off here, obviously. Now if it's stuck to the hub on the back side here through corrosion, all I gotta do is hit it like this, or hit it from the back side on the wheel itself with a rubber mallet, something like that blow. That's a little soft faced on there, it won't ruin your rim. This one obviously is coming right off. No problem, no sweat. Now make sure that your vehicle is sitting on a quality jack stand, so we're not having to worry about the vehicle falling on us while we're working on it. Once it's on there, get it centered here. There we go. Actually centered. Drop it onto there. I like to keep the jack on the frame still with a little bit of pressure on it, just in case something fails, something gets knocked over. Alright, now once the wheel's out of the way and we're sitting on jack stands, we're nice and safe and secure. Make sure your key is in the accessory position so we can turn the wheel and it's not locked no more. Grab it, make sure it's cold, obviously, and then we're going to turn it like this so we can get to the back side here for the caliper bolts. So we can get the caliper out of the way and start working. Alright, so in order to get this caliper off, we're going to want to compress the pads in a little bit so we can get past the rust ridge right here. This one's not too bad, but they can get quite extensive. So once it's compressed in just a little bit, then we'll come back here to the, let's see, should be able to see them, 18 millimeter bolt right there, and then one down below there also. Take those out and your caliper will be free. We can take it and we can hang it up onto the frame there. And then the two 18 millimeter bolts, top and bottom, that hold it in. I prefer to do the bottom ones first, and then the top ones will kind of hold it, whereas the bottoms of this whole thing might flop. So we'll just do the bottom first. Get it out of the way. And then we're going to use our OTC hook we got. Hook it to the frame so we're not stretching the caliper hose out of there and damaging it. Just get it hung and supported. And that's the way to do it right there. The hose isn't stretched or twisted in any weird way, and the caliper is supported securely to a solid piece of the frame up in there. The next thing we got to do is pull the rotor off so we can get to the hub. So we're going to get the rotor off, we're going to bang it off of there, and then we can start messing around with the axle nut itself. Alright, so getting these off can be quite a pain, especially if you're not changing the rotors out because you don't want to damage them. Now if we do smack one of these studs, no big deal, we're changing the hub out. But you still don't want to do it as a good practice. So we're going to hit the flat spots all here, all the way around, and try to break the bond of the rotor to the hub face, which is quite large on these and can be quite a pain. So It'll look something like this. And you see it there, it's flopping. I broke the bond. Now rust penetrants can be sprayed up inside of here to try to break the bond, but the best thing to do is to actually beat it off of there. It's going to do the most work on there and get it done fastest. After that, it should slide off. Okay, and we'll clean the face of the backside here of the rotor before putting it back on, so there's no problems. Now these ones in particular have a slotted retainer over the regular nuts inside of there, so it has a cotter pin right here in the middle, and just use you know, needle nose, dikes, whatever to bend it back straight, and we can get it through there. And once you get it straight enough on there, just simply grab the other side here, twist like this, and keep pulling. And then this part should simply, you know, slide right off there, put it to the side so you don't lose it. We're going to need it going back on. And then we got the axle nut right here. Now inspect your threads, make sure they're not really rusty on there, where it's going to cause a cross thread coming off. It's always a good idea for wire brushing these and put a little bit of rust penetrant on here so it eases the removal process without stripping anything coming off of there. Alright, this one in particular is a 35mm. It fits in there nice and snug. Spray a little bit of rust penetrant on here, let it soak, and then we'll wire brush it to clean the threads before we take it off of there. Like I said, this one's not so bad, so... And we'll use brake cleaner to get the garbage off of there. And you should probably have a rag or compressed air. Like that. And we'll spray a little rust penetrant back on there to ease it off of there. Let's see if the old 3/8 Impact can do this. Yeah, I might be able to do this whole freaking job with the 3/8 Milwaukee. Unbelievable. We'll see. Now one last thing you want to do is get this axle shaft broken free of the hub itself. It's kind of pressed in there a little bit, so you want to back it out. Now you can put the nut back on there flush like this and pound it in, or you can use an air hammer like this. Goes right in the center there and vibrates it through. Hopefully I can show it on camera here. See it right there? Alright, at this point we have all our brake components removed. We have our rotor, our caliper all safely hung out of the way. Our axle nut is off of here. Our axle is pushed in so it's separated from the hub and bearing right here. The next thing you want to do before you forget is take off this ABS wiring from the brake hose. It clips in right here and here to the brake hose, and then just follow it up to the main harness in the body, and you can unclip it so that we can have it free and just sit in here, because the next thing we gotta do is take off a few more nuts, and this whole thing's gonna drop out of here. Hub and bearing, knuckle, and all. It's gonna be heavy. You don't want it still connected. Speaking of, what you want to do is take off the outer tie rod end nut here and the upper ball joint nut right here. They're both 13/16, and then down below here the lower ball joint nut is 1 1/16 on there. Each one of these are going to have cotter pins in them, so you need to bend them straight and then tap them through and then pull them out from the other side and get them out of there, and then you can start taking the nuts off of there. Now one note on this upper arm up here, it's under a lot of tension, so what you want to do is get a jack down here under the lower control arm and support it, something like this, couple pumps, so that all that tension is relieved off the upper arm, or else you pull this nut off of here and that arm can go flying up out of there or get bound in there. Either way, it's not good. So we'll start taking these out of here. Now there's a couple different ways to separate these joints on here. All these have tapered joints in them, the upper, the lower, and of course the outer tie rod on here. So the easiest way to do it without the tool that clips onto here and presses by the stud is to wrap on the side right here with your hammer, and usually that vibration will be enough to break the bond, and it'll kind of just pop up and out of there loose. If it's really stubborn, what you can do is put the nut back on here flush and then tap it through. Now you can see this one's pretty much coming out already. This truck isn't that rusty. We'll get this lower one off of here. Now don't take this lower ball joint nut off just yet. Just loosen it, break it loose, and take it down a couple threads like this, but leave it on there by a few threads, because when we separate the knuckle from the lower ball joint, this whole thing, knuckle, bearing, everything, it's really heavy, it's just gonna drop right on our feet or on our hands or whatever. So let it drop onto the nut instead once it's separated. And the same thing up top here with the hammer trick. Just wrap on the side or wrap down below with a nut on there that's flushed out, and it should pop right through on there. They're not that bad. Let's see on this one. And then the same thing. Like I said, make sure it's nuts on here, and you're just gonna wrap on the side of it here, right here, and that whole thing should just fall right out of there. Right here. Like so. Okay, at this point, make sure you're ready for all the weight. Get it up, loosen it, and then start getting it off of here and separate from the axle shaft all at the same time. Like so. It's not too bad, just have to wiggle a little bit. Alright, at this point, let's clean up the axle surface right here with some brake clean, the splines, even the threads over here, and get the grease and grit off of there. And then we're going to hang it up and out of the way. Yeah, it's a little rusty. Now it's best to use mechanics wire, something like that, but something like this, these smaller bungees, is just fine. It's really not that heavy. You just want it up and out of your way, as high as you can go, so you can work on the lower ball joint. Okay, now if your ball joints are aftermarket, they're going to have a grease fitting right here. You want to get that off of there, it's just going to be in the way of us getting it out of there, so it usually comes off pretty easy like that. Just get rid of that. And then you need to clean the area all around here. This one's really freaking greasy and everything else, because there's a snap ring up here. So you have to get in here and get all the dirt out of here. Oh, there it is, it's buried, but since it's buried in grease and grime, it kind of keeps it nice and clean for us as far as rust goes. So it shouldn't be an issue. So cleaned up like that, so we can get access to it. And once the ball joint's out, we can do a thorough cleaning. Now, I don't know if you can see it or not, but you'll see it on yours. There's going to be two ears with holes in them. You're going to use your snap ring pliers and expand them out. See that? And they'll come right off of there. At this point, the only thing that's holding that ball joint in is the fact that it's pressed into there. So you can use a C-frame and get it out of there, or you can use my method. Now there's a few different ways you can get this out of here. You can use a C-frame press like usual. It takes a long time though. Or you can use a hammer. It'll just blow right through there. Or you can use your air hammer right in this little hole right here. It'll center it and we can vibrate it out of there. I prefer the hammer method. And let's see if I can get in here. Something like this. And once it starts going like that, it'll come right out. Now once it gets so far, like I was just saying, it gets a little easier and you can start using a smaller hammer so you're not hitting the whole outside there. See, now at that point I didn't have to even hit it that hard and it was still popping right through there. And that's the way to do it. Prevents damage. You don't need to take a hammer to a full swing. Just clean it up all the way around the bottom so it can seat. It's even a good idea to get a wire brush in here and just clean this all up on here. Now one thing I like to do, obviously, is make sure you didn't damage anything in here. If you did, use a file like this and make sure it's perfectly smooth, okay? And I like to go across the top of it also. Once you get this out of here, and down here, go across the top. Make it smooth, especially down here, where that ball joint's gonna sit flush against it. Well, it should sit flush against it. Don't get too aggressive on the inside here, else it'll be a loose ball joint. Alright, same thing, brake clean. And we'll clean it up on here. Look at that, huh? Like new. Now going back in, you want to make sure that the little notch in the boot right here, you might be able to see that right there, that's pointing inboard because that's where all the grease is going to spooge out of there if you over grease it, and you don't want to go in towards your brake caliper, obviously. So you can kind of get it up inside of here and get it started. Now, when you're using a C-frame press, what you want to do is use a outside receiver cup right here for the ball joint that matches the outer diameter of it. So you can press in the outer, not on the seal, obviously, the boot. And then down here, you're going to want something to complete that cup, so you can press off of that. And then up top here, you're going to have another piece, but it has to have a cavity inside of it though, because this is going to come up through about 1/8 of an inch or so. So you can't have it flush on there, a flat piece. It's got to have a cavity in it like this. And then when it comes up, it'll go into it like that. Alright, let's press it in. And you'll see how it comes through up top here, and that's what you're looking for. You'll make sure it comes through all the way, so this groove in here clears the lower arm, and we should be able to put this snap ring right in here. Now the snap ring does not matter which way it goes, just get it on there, make sure it's fully seated in the groove all the way around. At this point, it's safe to put our Zerk fitting in here. Just get it on there and get it straight. And then they kind of self-tap into there. Just keep it straight. And these are almost always standard sizes on here. This one's 3/8 in particular here. Now once you get it started, it'll thread in and make its own threads. Get it all the way in there. Just make sure when you're done that it points the right way, so it's actually, you know, accessible for greasing in the future. Alright, let's get our axle shaft back down and get these out of the way. And get ready for knuckle installation. Now your new ball joint should come with a new nut like this, so you have it in hand, ready to go. So when we're, putting the knuckle on here and lining these 2 points up on there, we have that nut to put it on there right away and support it, because it gets heavy after a while of jerking around with lining it up. Make sure your threads are clean. Same thing on here. We're ready. Get your CV shaft through. Ball joint. It should kind of line up like that. Now once it's threaded on there, it'll hold, everything will be just fine, and we can start getting the other attachment points together, including the upper ball joint on here. Alright, make sure your nuts are clean. Same thing, a little brake clean, some rag action, and now getting this upper arm down into here is a real pain. So what you gotta do is use a pry tool of sorts or a regular pry bar. Get it over and under like this. You see that? And it'll fall right into there. I'm literally using about 2 fingers on here to pull this down. And then you can start getting your nut on there. There we go. Now while you're holding this down like this and putting pressure on there, it's also a good time to do your final tightening of this upper ball joint nut, because you're holding it down into that taper on there, and the stud should stay while you torque it down. Same thing. Let's get this nut on here, tighten it up, and then we'll torque it down. Now with all this pressure on here, you should be able to start tightening down the lower ball joint on here also. Get it started, and then you can start torquing it. Now the torque specs for the upper ball joint and the outer tie rod end here is 75 foot-pounds. So let's torque those down. And these should hold, no problem. They shouldn't spin in their bore. They should start seating right away and give you no problem to torque down. Now let's get our cotter pins in there. There's a hole in the stud that goes through, and then of course slots in the castellated nut. So you just need to line it up. Never loosen it to make this fit through. Always tighten it more. So you just look through there and see if we're lined up. If we're not, tighten it a little more. It's very important. And this right here is how I do my cotter pins. Put it in all the way, wrap it up and around, and then tap it again on this side. Should be able to see that. And that way it's fully secured on there and this thing's not hanging off somewhere. Okay, at this point we have the upper ball joint secured, torqued down, cotter pin through, and the outer tie rod end, same thing, torqued down, cotter pin through. Now it's time to do the lower ball joint on here. And the lower ball joint is 115 foot-pounds. Alright, and the same thing applies to this one. If the cotter pin doesn't go through, just tighten it a little bit more until everything lines up and you can get that cotter pin in there. And this one took quite a bit to get to line up. Don't worry about it. It's not gonna hurt anything. These components for suspension, they're ultra strong. Just torque them down and make sure you have the cotter pin in there. That's the most important part. Okay, now let's get this axle nut on here. We're going to use blue Loctite on that since there's no locking feature otherwise. Put it back in here a little bit. And we'll get that snug down. And then once the brake components are on, we can torque it down. Alright, let's get this shield back on here before I forget again. I did that before in a video, and I found it later. Either way, it's still a pain. So let's get it on now. Should all line up pretty good on here. Tighten. Okay. And one last one down here. Shields on. Let's put the rotor on next. And it's always a good idea to check the backside of the rotor right here for rust buildup. You want to clean that off of there so that there's not a stack up of rust on there, and then you start getting a wobble going on the road. This one's not that bad, so I'm not worried about it. So we're going to put it right on here. Like so. We're going to get our bolts for the brake caliper bracket. Put some Loctite on them. And then come over here and slide it onto here. And I like to do the top bolt first. You can see it. It's easier to line up. And then the caliper will just hang from there. We can slide the bottom one up and out of here. Something like this. We'll snug these bolts down. And the torque spec on these caliper bracket bolts is 140 foot-pounds. Let's get it torqued down. And again, just make sure your brake hose is not twisted before tightening these down. All right. Let's get this ABS wiring right here connected and snapped into the brake hose. As it goes up, there's 2 points, and then of course connected into the vehicle harness and route it up through there. Alright, now that the brake caliper is back on, we can torque down the axle nut, and we're going to use a flat blade screwdriver like this, nice thick one. And we're going to stick it in the slots in the rotor, and that'll hold it from turning on there. Now the torque spec on here is 225 foot-pounds. Torque that down. And this torque spec is critical because it holds the hub and bearing together and supports it both sides on there. Alright, check it again. Good. Get that out of there first thing so you don't forget it. And then we'll put this retainer onto here. And if it doesn't line up with the hole on there, just keep moving it. Okay? And then you put your cotter pin through. Now some guys like to spread it out like a Y, one on each side. I feel it's stronger to take both of these sides of the cotter pin and just take them to one side and tighten it that way. personal preference. So you just get it bent up like this as far as you can go, and then you can use a combination of the hammer, and that'll just get it hooked around on there. Something like that. Something like that. Now at this point it's pretty much done. All you have to do is put the wheel back on. But before that, I suggest you do a good thorough visual inspection of everything you touched on here, all the bolts, everything like that. Make sure everything's back in place and torqued down, because we took a lot of things off to do this, and it's a lot of different pieces that can fail and fall off going down the road. So just check it out before you put the wheel back on. Alright, let's get this wheel back on and torque down and be done with this already. Now the torque spec on these can be 100 or 150 depending if you have the base payload package or heavy duty package. I torque them all at 150 though. And that's the way all the new F-150s are also. And it's always a good idea to torque them down in a crisscross pattern. And I personally like to recheck. Alright, that wasn't so bad. As long as you had the proper tools, the job is not that bad on these vehicles. It's a 2004 new body style and newer where the ball joints get really tough in there. The biggest point to take away from all this is when you're pushing that and you're pressing that ball joint in, look underneath and make sure it's in there straight all the way around and that's flush against the bottom side of the lower control arm. That way we know it's fully inserted and it's not cocked in there, anything weird like that, throwing off driveline angles or causing noise issues, and we got the job done right and everything's secure. Besides that, follow the video, follow the torque specs, and you'll be able to change this out in a couple hours, no sweat, and that's taking your time.